This is Walter Bosley. I'll be reading a selection from Men and Gods in Mongolia by Henning Haslund. Chapter 15. In the course of a night ride across the ice-covered surface of Lake Bagrashkol, I had lost my companion and for his guidance had set fire to a reed bed which stuck up through the ice. Worn out with weariness and cold, I went to sleep close by the burnt-out but still glowing remains of the fire, and awoke to find that the heat had scorched and charred a third part of my big wolfskin coat. On my return to Urget, my burnt coat aroused far more remark than I was able to explain, and to my amazement my Tibetan friends carried the coat away after having closely examined its damaged part. The hardships of the preceding 24 hours sent me early to bed, but in the depth of the night I awoke to see Lobsang Gelling by my side. He was sitting crouched over the glow of the brazier, and its feeble light picked out his face as an amber-yellow mask against the formless gloom of the surroundings. Dazed with sleep, I sat up in my sleeping sack, a confused question on my lips. "Dress yourself in Asiatic clothing," whispered the yellow mask, "for you will soon be summoned. Gegin and his mystical adepts are at this moment divining your destiny in accordance with the will of the gods. Listen!" The hollow thud of drums sounded from somewhere. The strident note of some instrument was born and died away like the howl of the night storm across the steppe. I dressed hurriedly and sat down beside the Tibetan, but all his senses were lost in listening to the sounds of the night, and he left my wondering questions unanswered. The moment the pulsation of the drums ceased out there, Lobsang bade me follow him. In silence we walked towards the enclosure of the 7 tents. The night was pitch dark. Only here and there a pale star peeped through the storm-torn clouds. We passed 6 sleeping tents, but strange sounds came from Yuda Yanordo, and a cone of light rose from the roof opening of the sanctuary. Then I followed my guide in through the tent door and set foot in the dim temple of the Tantra cult. The air was thick with incense, and the dark mysticism of Central Asia closed in about me. In the restless light from the fire and the oil lamps, I caught glimpses, through misty veils of smoke and incense, of the room's astounding colors. In the middle of the tent, behind the crackling fire, sat Seng Chen, between the 2 Lama astrologers, and I was conducted to the place opposite to him so that the circle was completed. On the floor between us lay my burnt wolfskin coat. Yellow-clad lamas sat around the inner circuit of the tent. Their chanting voices rose and fell in monotonous cadences, whose dreary rhythm was drowned time after time by the rumble of the drums. The temple banners swayed slowly with the movement of waves of hot air, and their awe-inspiring images of gods glared malignantly through billowing clouds of smoke. The 3 holy men sat long, intent upon the holes and wrinkles in my scorched wolfskin, and muttering prayers, they passed their fingers softly over the burnt fur. Time after time they exchanged glances of common understanding. Incense was thrown on the fire, which sent up clouds, soot-black, silver-white, and rust-red. Gegin and the astrologers straightened themselves up from their crouching position. The lamas fell silent, and the orchestra's infernal discord ceased. For a while the 3 holy men gazed at me, but impersonally and absently, as though they saw me not. Then their strained and sweating faces lighted up with friendly smiles, and their kind glances met my astonished eyes, and then the elder Lama astrologer spoke. "This night we have interpreted the writing of the fire upon your wolfskin. We have found many propitious signs which confirm what we have long surmised. It is not by chance that our Gegin's Tibetan name Seng Chen and your Mongolian name Arsalan both signify the tiger. It is not by chance that our time's incarnation of Seng Chen and your body were both born under the sign of the sacred monkey. And it is a sign from the higher powers that the deformity which from birth distinguishes the earthly reincarnations of Seng Chen the tiger god, has been laid as a shadow over your left knee. That which we have now divined provides the confirmation of what the all-knowing Yolros Lama long ago foresaw, for the meeting between Seng Chen and Arsalan is a link in Yolros Lama's prophecy of Zayagan. Seng Chen and Arsalan are foreordained by the gods as Akadue, and destiny has brought your earthly paths together here that the will of the gods may have an earthly ratification. A lama glided forward to our circle, carrying a smoking incense dish which he placed on the wolfskin round which we were standing. The bottom of the flat dish was covered with embers from which an ash-gray column of smoke and a heavy, stupefying odor arose. 2 long incense sticks lay on the wide rim of the dish, and Seng Chen thrust the ends of these into the embers. The circle of yellow llamas had resumed their chanting, but now they crooned their ritual quite softly, and the drums were silent. Then the old lama on my right grasped my left wrist and rolled back my wide Mongolian sleeve to the elbow. At the same time, the lama on my left took up one of the lighted incense sticks and lightly placed its tip upon the inner side of my bared forearm. The procedure was inexplicable to me, but I saw from the friendly faces of the llamas that they wished me no ill. At first I felt nothing, but after a nerve-wracking eternity, which perhaps was a matter of seconds, I became aware of a slight tingling sensation where the glowing point touched my bare skin. The irritation gave way to acute pain, and there was a smell of burnt flesh. I contracted my muscles and began to count, and when I reached 9, I wrenched my arm away. The wound burned, smarted, and throbbed while the llamas narrowly examined its character, but they gravely shook their heads, and I must needs again go through the same procedure. This time the incense stick was placed more firmly and against a more fleshy spot, 2 inches above the first, and I had to contract my muscles harder and count louder, for this time my arm was held steadily in the grip of strong hands. My second burn turned out to the satisfaction of the llamas. They nodded amiably, anointed my arm with oil, and wrapped it in wadding and linen. A gleam of dawn stole in through the roof opening, and the mystery of the tent evaporated before the blue-green reality of daybreak. Stupefied and bewildered, I followed Lobson out into the early morning. Like a sleepwalker, I reached my room. From the Temple of the Mysteries still sounded the braying of bassoons, the clash of cymbals, and the hollow thud of drums. "Now you are an initiate," I heard the Tibetan say. "You are one of us." My last visual impression before I fell asleep was of Lobson. Again he was sitting by the brazier, but now his smiling face and the whole room lay in the clear light of the morning sun. When the ringing bugle call from the guard on the town wall announced the setting of the sun, I awoke out of my trance. Insane dreams stuck to my brain, but the bandage round my arm and the pain I felt at every movement convinced me that the nightmares had a substratum of reality. Ravenous as a desert wolf, I bellowed for food, and to my surprise, my summons was obeyed not only by the friendly Torgut attendants, but also by my 2 Chinese whom I had not seen for a long time. Lao Chang and Sui Dur were in ecstasies over the prospect of departure, for the regent had given them orders to get ready for our start. In their eyes, the Torguts were not bad as Mongols went, but the Chinese quarter of Urumqi beckoned to them with all that is clear and dear to a Chinaman's heart. The report of the Chinese was confirmed later in the evening by my 4 Asiatic friends. Yes, I was to go. I was to return to the west, and the 2 astrologers had said that I must hasten both my departure and my return. Lobson conducted me to Seng Chen, who on our entrance ordered his guard and his servants to leave the room, and Lobson too withdrew. It was the first time during the whole of my stay in Uriget that I had been alone with the holy man. He was attired in the garb of a living Buddha, the sumptuous folds and blazing colors of which looked incongruous among the sober European appointments of the room. That night Seng Chen gave me his confidence and threw open to me the storehouse of his mind. His dreams, hopes, and view of life seemed to me to throw light upon two sides of the Hutuktu's complex personality, sides as dissimilar as spring and autumn, and both authentic as the alternations of nature. Profoundly conscious of his divine calling, Seng Chen spoke of the sublimity of life and of the world-embracing mission for which he had been reincarnated. But he spoke also with the joy in life of a man still young of his longing for new experiences, and the degree to which his heart was set on satisfying his curiosity about the great world beyond the steppes seemed a little pathetic in his Central Asiatic isolation. He explained to me in detail the happenings of the previous night and laid stress on their importance to us both. Our life paths had crossed each other here because it was the will of the gods that we should stand by one another. He knew my wishes, and through him they should be fulfilled, for my wishes accorded with his mission. It is not the new copy of our temple that you shall take to the west, for the worth of this is only the worth of metals and stuffs and their fashionings. No, it is the consecrated sanctuary itself, whose gods inspire mankind's highest and noblest thoughts, that you shall carry with you, and its worth cannot be sold or bought with earthly money. You shall carry Gegen Ni Ordo to the Khan of the Swedes as a gift from Seng Chen Doryashan, with messages from a divinity of Buddhism and from the nomads of the steppes to the people in whose midst Panchen Bogdo shall one day be reborn. There is need of haste for your departure, and there is need of haste for your return, for other tasks await us which require our cooperation, and my days are numbered. Eagerly he planned in detail the transport of the temple and its erection in that distant land, so that the sanctuary might remain as long as possible under the blessing of his influence and protection. His lamas and soldiers should carry it to our expedition's headquarters, and Lirip Gelling should accompany it until we were out of Chinese territory. To avoid the attention of the Chinese Amban and Karashar, the temple and my caravan were to travel to Urumqi by different routes. Seng Chen foresaw with stoical resignation the violent end of his existence, for the astrologers had foretold that he would meet the same fate as his spiritual predecessor. But before this, he wished to see the world that lay outside the steppes. When I returned to take him out to the wide world so that, like the Khan of the Afghans, he might be able to possess himself of the Western learning which might give strength to his people. After that, he would place at my disposal men and camels for expeditions which should bring to the West new knowledge of the nomads, and therewith understanding of the truths which alone bring blessing. He would unveil for me the profoundest learning of the Torguts. We talked long of East and West, and it was wonderful how well they met. I went blissfully to bed, for now I had reached the goal of my dreams. This was Zayagan. That was Chapter 15 from Men and Gods in Mongolia by Henning Haslund.